kilka słów dosłownie o nas, bo jesteśmy, jak tutaj już nas Artur przedstawił, sponsorem dzisiejszego spotkania. Więc kilka zdań dosłownie o 7M, bo właśnie reprezentujemy firmę 7M. Na rynku jesteśmy znani z przejrzystych warunków współpracy, jeżeli chodzi o kontrakty dla specjalistów IT.
Pytanie, czy w ogóle ktoś od nas słyszał? Okej, parę osób. Tak.
To może tylko powiemy tyle, że przejrzyste warunki współpracy, brak umów lojalnościowych, brak zakazu, jakichś obostrzeń związanych z okresami wypowiedzenia i tego typu kwestii. Tego u nas nie ma. Dobre zaopiekowanie nad konsultantami, w sensie sporo możliwości do tego, żeby się zintegrować z 7M. Każdy konsultant ma swojego indywidualnego opiekuna, który też wspiera konsultanta po stronie klienta. To jest jakby taka nasza marka. Też wyróżniamy się na pewno doświadczeniem zawodowym naszych konsultantów, bo jak porównujemy siebie też do innych firm, to podobnych do nas, to przeciętnie nasze doświadczenie zawodowe naszego konsultanta jest trochę wyższe niż u konkurencji. To jest 10 lat takiego doświadczenia już konkretnego w IT. I średni okres współpracy konsultanta z nami też jest jakoś jednak dłuższy niż u konkurencji. Przeciętnie 4 lata trwa współpraca konsultanta z nami. Główne takie domeny technologiczne, gdzie jesteśmy obecni na rynku, to jest Java i .NET. To może tyle takim tytułem wstępu, bo mamy też dla Was krótki quiz i możliwość przy okazji wygrania kilku nagród rzeczowych. To są książki i to jest taka skórzana okładka. Można ją
otworzyć.
Zamknąć.
Otworzyć fajne rzeczy. Właśnie, od czasu do czasu lubimy też dawać trochę prezentów. To co, może
z pytaniami, to wiem, że miałeś kilka.
Aha, dobra. My tu byliśmy też parę miesięcy temu. Trochę się u nas zmieniło, pewnie też u Was. Na początek może takie o właśnie, pytanie z dobrej zmiany. W ilu krajach w ogóle 7M jest obecnie? Ktoś wie? Albo podejrzewa? Powiedzmy, że można się...
Ja mam 2.
No nie.
8.
7.
O, kolega już trafił za pierwszym razem. Faktycznie 8. Niedawno otworzyliśmy nowy oddział do tej pory.
Tak, jako pierwsza osoba, która powiedziała poprawnie, masz możliwość najszerszego wyboru, więc możesz wybrać skórę,
Furę.
Angulara, książkę z Angulara, albo podręcznik z Scrum.
Co wyraźnie to jest?
Proszę, dziękuję do Ciebie.
Przekażę dalej.
Pytanie numer 2 będzie dotyczyło może też kontynuując tego 7M. Całkiem niedawno właśnie 7M otworzyło swoje biuro w nowej lokalizacji w Europie. Czy wiecie, w jakim kraju? Tak nie będziemy zdawali podpowiedzi, ale możecie strzelać.
Stamtąd się wywodzi.
A może nowy oddział otwarty, no.
Kierunek jest dobry.
Szwecja.
Prawie, coraz bliżej.
Norwegia.
No Szwecja chyba była troszeczkę nawet bliżej niż Norwegia, ale tak jest. To odpowiedział Finlandia. Co wybierasz? Skóra, Angular, Scrum.
Angular w której wersji? Tylko sprawa.
Dobre pytanie. Mieć drugą książkę za nie dostać.
Może technicznie.
Proszę bardzo.
Dobra, to mała ciekawostka z obszaru Java. Kto wie, jaki jest domyślny zasięg mina w Springu?
Singleton.
Angular, Scrum,
To jest gra.
Dzisiaj Scrum, to muszę powiedzieć.
Jakoś nikt nie chce.
Kurczę, może pokażę co w środku.
W środku są przegródki skórzane.
Świeże powietrze.
Dobra. To może kolejne pytanie. W przyszłym tygodniu będzie na Stadionie Narodowym konferencja, na której zresztą też będziemy obecni. We wtorek. Czy ktoś kojarzy temat tej konferencji? Jakiej technologii będzie poświęcony? Angular, dokładnie. No to masz do wyboru. Angular albo skóra.
Angular.
Może jakieś pytanie jeszcze? To może sprawdzimy, czy dokładnie słuchaliście nas na początku. Wspominałem o doświadczeniu zawodowym naszych konsultantów, naszego przeciętnego konsultanta. Więc pewnie sporo osób słyszało. Mówiłem, pytanie na refleks. To znaczy, jakie jest przeciętne doświadczenie zawodowe, technologiczne naszego konsultanta? Pierwsza ręka.
10 lat.
Tak jest. Skóra. Prawdziwy mężczyzna. Dobra. Zostały dwa podręczniki z Angulara. Kolejne pytanie. Mam teraz 7N. Tak jak wspomniałem, stawiamy na jawność, przejrzystość warunków. Może orientujecie się, jak modelowo wygląda podział marży, znaczy podział właśnie przychodu 7N z uwzględnieniem marży. Ręka w górze?
70 do 30.
Nie?
Ja 75, 20.
Brawo, tak jest.
O,
Wygląda?
szczęśliwy na wysłanie Angulara.
Bardzo. I ostatnie pytanie.
A ostatnim razem, jak tu byliśmy, było pytanie też o znajomość Solida. A w sumie wtedy chyba wszyscy, wiele osób wiedziało. A pytanie, czy kojarzycie takie nazwisko Liskow? Kim była ta osoba?
Kobieta.
I dlaczego stała się sławna w takim razie? Co?
Za współpracę pryncypów.
Zgadza się.
Okej. Angular dla Ciebie.
Nie, dziękuję. Dajcie komuś innemu, ja Angulara nie chcę.
Dobra, to dodatkowe pytanie w takim razie.
Dobra, to może teraz...
Wymienię kilka modułów Springa. Waszym zadaniem będzie selekcja negatywna, czyli stwierdzenie, który z tych modułów
Nie działa.
nie działa. Nie jest prawdziwym modułem Springa. To może tak chcieli. Dependency injection, MVC, MVVM, security. Brawo. Angular dla Ciebie. Nie masz wejścia.
Dobra, wielkie dzięki za uwagę. Jeśli bylibyście zainteresowani, czym co się u nas dzieje, też w jaki sposób współpracujemy z naszymi ludźmi, to zapraszamy oczywiście do kontaktu.
Przynieśliśmy tutaj jeszcze pudełko z próbkami, także za chwilę je tutaj wypakujemy. Każdy, kto będzie chciał, przy wyjściu niech sobie zabierze na skosztowanie albo na pamiątkę smacznej krówki. Dziękujemy za uwagę, życzymy dobrych wrażeń z prezentacji. Dzięki.
Okay, so let's get it started because we don't have much time, although we have 2 hours. Hopefully I'm going to manage to do it in 2 hours. So welcome to the presentation entitled Consumer-Driven Contracts and Your Microservice Architecture. If you have already seen my presentation previously or you have seen the webinar, don't worry. Like most of the things you're going to see is new. I hate repeating myself, so every time I'm doing a new presentation, I'm trying to add some new stuff. So before we go to the main topic, a couple of words about myself. So I'm working for the Spring Cloud team at Pivotal. Who knows Pivotal? Okay, most people. So for those who don't know what Pivotal is a small startup that's created Spring Cloud, Spring Boot, a lot of stuff. So I think I'm the lead, or at least I'm working on those 3 projects. So Spring Cloud Sleuth, so distributed tracing, Spring Cloud Contracts, which is about consumer-driven contracts. We're going to talk about this today. And the new thing, Spring Cloud Pipelines, so it's about deployment pipelines. My Twitter handle is @mgrzejszczak, and you can find my blog at toomuchcoding.com. Okay, so the agenda looks very simple because there's going to be introduction, demo, and summary. So that's it. So before we go to the introduction, really I would like to have your attention because first I would like to tell you what we are not going to talk about. Because recently there was some commotion going on Twitter about what contracts are, and a couple of different things emerged in terms of Spring Cloud Contract or the CDC, like consumer-driven contracts as such. So we will not talk about schemas, WSDLs, ESBs, XSDs, XSLTs, and all the things like this. Because the idea of Spring Cloud Contract is actually not to introduce unnecessary coupling or replicate old mistakes. Although it might not seem like this, we're not stupid. That's why we didn't want to reinvent something that already people proven that it sucks. So that's why we didn't want to replicate new WSDLs or stuff like that. So Spring Cloud Contract and consumer-driven contracts are not these things. I think that I'm going to use schema once only during the whole presentation to say that this is not a schema, something like that. Okay, introduction. So in order for us to even understand the topic, we have to define some vocabulary. Producer. So a producer is a service that exposes an API or sends a message. So if you've seen a webinar or a presentation, it used to finish on this. But today we're going to talk also about messaging. That's why messages appear here. Consumer. A consumer is a service that consumes the API of the producer or listens to a message from the producer. In other words, if you have an app, you have a REST template or any other thing, and you send a request, you are consuming the API of the other service, so you are a consumer. Also, if you're listening to a topic or queue and wait for messages, you're a consumer of that message. Contract. It's an agreement between producer and consumer on how the API message will look like, but it's not a schema, because we're not presenting all possible fields. It's more about scenarios. How it looks like you're going to see in a sec. In terms of messaging, it's also about where the message will be sent and why. You will also see that in a second. So what are consumer-driven contracts? So this is an approach where the consumer drives the changes of the API of the producer. Because the name consumer suggests that it consumes, so it knows what kind of the API would suit its needs. So that's why the consumer should drive the changes of the API. So whenever you hear a new buzzword, new tool, new approach, new whatever, new JavaScript library, you should ask yourself a question: what problems are we trying to solve by using this thing? If you cannot answer this question, don't use the thing, right? Maybe after the whole presentation, you'll see that the tool, the approach doesn't solve your needs. If that's the case, don't use it, right? As simple as that. So there are two most important things. The first one is stub validity and reusability in the integration tests. What it means, I'm going to show in big details. And nice API creation. This is specifically related to HTTP, but also, let's say, messaging in terms of how the payload should look like. But let's more, in this regard, we're going to focus on HTTP. Okay, so typical situation, this is how most of your production systems look like. So there's a consumer sending a request to the producer, like simple stuff. Now the question is, how can you write a test for it? Because most people write tests. I know one person in this room that doesn't write tests. Don't go that way. So basically, how would you write a test for it? One of the approaches is that you basically deploy both apps, right? And you run end-to-end tests. And it's a good approach, but somehow problematic. Why? Because the feedback cycle is longer. You have to wait for this to deploy, for this to start. This may be talking to 15 other services that talk to 89 other services. You need databases, you need a lot of stuff, so it takes time. So you can do something else. You can talk to a stub. And typically, that's what you're doing. For example, when you're using Mockito, right? You're mocking a class or an interface. because you want a faster feedback. If there's an interface that's calling database, you're mocking it out because you don't want to call the database, right? Similar stuff. So let us assume that we have a consumer application, a consumer app called Pivotal Calculator Service. This application will send a request to Pivotal History Service, whatever. So this thing will send a request to another service. So this is the consumer. And what typically happens is that the consumer defines stubs, right? Who is using WireMock? Who knows what WireMock is? WireMock. Not many people. So WireMock is a library that is in fact a stub of an HTTP server. So when, for example, you want to send a request in your tests, but you don't want to like start the other application, you can start a fake server. So how does it look like? This is an example of a stub definition in WireMock. So you're saying that given a request with method post was sent to URL history, you would like a response with status 201 and headers content type to be sent back. It resembles Mockito, right? So given a method was called with such arguments, then return some value, right? So this is one example. Another example, we have a request with method put with URL history that has some body patterns. For example, the text inside the body contains 5 + 5. If that's the case, return status to 100 with body result, some JSON. So already you can see that writing a JSON in a JSON is a pain in the ass. And yes, it is. This is a very simple one, but if you have nested lists, maps, and things like that, it's hectic, terrible. And here you have content type application JSON. The last thing, there's a post with URL history, and if you have 6 + 6, then return 400. This is the way you can like create some stubs in order to test different integrations. Like, what if the other side returns a error status or a proper status? You can do, let's say, different sets of tests. And now let's assume that we're introducing a new endpoint. What does it mean? Let's say that we're the consumer app, we are writing these stubs for the producer side, and suddenly we're calling over the phone the other side, and they tell us, hey, we've introduced a new endpoint. Whatever, like, let's say that the URL of this endpoint is some non-existent URL. So let's call it like this. They say, we've introduced such endpoint, go ahead, you can, we rolled it out to production, you can use it. So you said, okay. Of course, if you're working in an enterprise, you would prefer to have it written in an email if something bad happens. But let's say that you didn't do that. Lessons learned, right? So let's say that you're writing in your stub where you say that if I send a request with a method post to URL, some non-existent URL, I want status to 101. So now what? You write the missing code, like to work with the new URL, because you want to profit from that feature, right? So you're writing the tests, you're sending that request, that unit integration tests pass, you're happy, and now you deploy your application to an environment where real integration will take place, and you have nothing to worry because your build is green, right? Your unit and integration tests passed. And then, of course, disaster happens, as it typically does. And why is it so? Because first you trusted somebody else, and the other thing is that stubs that were used in the build phase have nothing to do with the real API. What does it mean? It means that you had your test, right? There's the consumer app, you wrote the stub for the producer, right? You're sending a message, and there are unicorns because like your stub reacted as you wrote it should, right? Simple stuff. But then it turned out that in reality, when you're sending that request, the app says, what the hell, I don't have such an endpoint. I mean, there's no such thing for 104. And it happens a lot of times. So another example with messaging. So when you're stubbing, like when you're doing messaging and you're writing stubs yourself, you're completely, let's say, in control of the process. So let's say that what typically happens is that, for example, your app is consuming messages from a topic, right? And you say that you're sending a message to a topic called bar, and your consumer app receives that message, and everything is awesome, right? But then in reality, and I'm really saying reality because I saw this happen, was that the producer on production sent it to Foo, whereas you were listening to Bar. And even though your feature works, you haven't heard, like, you didn't pull any single message. And that's what I saw happen often. So, the problem that we are talking about at this point is stub validity and reusability. The problem here was that stubs reside with the consumer. So the consumer controls completely the stubbing process. Whatever the consumer writes there in the stubs will happen. Like, what's the difference between this and Mockito? Why Mockito works? Because you're stubbing your own code that you own, right? So, and also the compiler helps you to identify whether the method exists, because you cannot mock a method that doesn't exist. I mean, you can do it with Groovy, but let's assume that we have static compilation, right? So if you're if you on an interface you want to mock a method that doesn't exist, the compiler will not let you do it. Also, Mockito gives you this arg-that thing, that, for example, if the argument of a method is equal to 4, then return this, and if 5, then return this. You can do argument matching. Here, the problem is that you're mocking something that you don't own, because it's in another process, it's in another code base. So how can you be sure that the stubs are still valid? This is one thing. The others, what if other teams want to reuse those stubs? Right now there is a hype to go towards microservices, and often teams do that, but most projects have this monolithic app. It's still there. So what often happens is that you have Sun architecture, that the monolith is in the middle, and a lot of things are around sending requests to this like center of disaster. And now the thing is that every single microservice repeats the same work. It's stubbing the monolith. And the best thing is that the moment you write the stub, it's already outdated because somebody has changed the code base, like of the monolith. So these are those two problems. Another thing, how are you sure you're listening to the proper topic or queue? As I mentioned. Yet another thing is, how are you sure you'll deserialize your message properly? And this happens a lot. During the demo, I'm going to show you what's the biggest mistake when you're doing tests like of messaging. I can give you a short intro. Typically what you do on the consumer side is that you have to trigger a message, right? So what typically you would do is that you send that message using a payload of your own classes that you have. So if you're sending a class, like if you're sending an object of a class that you're using also for deserialization, you're 100% sure it's going to pass because you send the same class that you use for receiving. I'm going to show you that later. What happens when you're sending things over the wire is that the other project doesn't have your classes. It has different classes, so you can have a typo in the field name, for example, and whereas you don't have it. So I know it might sound confusing. We're going to come to that, but this is a very typical problem related to messaging. The other thing is that often the API that you have to call is hideous, it's terrible. And you're the consumer, so like the biggest challenge can be for the teams that are doing the UI, because they have to really tweak around, do some hacks in order to prepare the request that the, let's say, server side wants. And what typically happens is that when the consumer side wants the producer side to change their API, what you can hear is that the producer side will say, if you don't like it, don't use it, or if you don't like it, file a PR or file an issue to our product owner. We're going to fix it in 58 sprints because we have more important things to do. And okay, you can do that, but like it means that nobody's happy in the company. So consumers should take part in the creation of the API of the producer if that's possible, because I can't believe Twitter asks like billions of users if they like their API. At some point you have to say, I mean, this is my API, and that's it. And, but if it's possible, you should try to contain it in such a way that the producer's API change should be driven by consumers. Because if there's no need for the consumers, like the consumers don't want the API to change, why should you do it? if you don't do it, if you don't talk, things can go messy. So here, obviously, unit tests pass, right? If you use one of those, it's okay. But integration tests fail. The same here. If, let's say, you're listening to topic bar, and this listens to topic foo, I mean, there's a problem. So potential answer to this problem is Spring Cloud Contract. So time for the demo. So what we're going to code is that our consumer app will be a service that gets beer requests. So somebody comes to the bar and says, I want a beer. And since we're like in the microservice world, we're doing only one thing only. The bartender does only one thing properly. So like the bartender can do beer. But the bartender doesn't know if the person can get the beer. Because I don't know why. That's a demo. So the bartender has to ask another service if the person can get the beer, if it's like he's old enough. So the feature is that if the user is too young, the beer will not be sold, and otherwise the beer will be granted. So this is the HTTP side. And the messaging, I was thinking how to introduce messaging here, like in order not to introduce a new app. So the feature is really stupid, but it shows like an idea. So basically, the consumer, so the bartender, wants to know how many users were rejected or were accepted. Like this is a statistical feature. So the producer will send a message to the consumer about verification results. So actually, I'm doing like a round trip, but let's forget about this, right? So when the producer gets an information that, oh, I should check if somebody is old enough to get the beer, he's going to do the verification and send a message with the result, like for example, eligible or not eligible, right? So yeah, that's the feature, and basing on the verification result, the consumer increments the counter. We're going to first work with HTTP. Once we're done, we're going to do messaging. So it looks like this. I'm 22, give me a beer. Can he get the beer? The consumer asks the producer. The answer is yes. There you go. Like in real life. Or more, this will be like in real life. So I'm 17, give me a beer. For simplicity, because regular expression is easier, let's say that if you're 20 plus, you're getting the beer. And if less, then you're not getting the beer. So in this case, the answer is no, and we say get lost. And the messaging feature is, there's the consumer over there, the producer here. So the producer has the question, hey, I mean, someone's 22, check him out. So the producer sends a message, positive verification took place, and the consumer increases the counter. And the other thing is, someone's 17, negative verification took place, and that's it. So whenever you see a black terminal or black IDE, we're on the consumer side. I've been doing this talk quite a few times. I haven't thought of a better way to discern this. I could have two laptops, but this is a problem. So black means a consumer. White means a producer. I will try to do it like properly, although on the lovely tool called Mac, whenever I do Command Tab, I should go between applications, and I don't sometimes. So if I by chance mix the terminals or the colors, then sorry. Okay, demo. We're on the consumer side. Can everybody see this? Like in the back? Okay, good. So we're on the consumer side, the black IDE. This is how, this is the white one. Oh, this is what I told you about. So can you see the font here in the terminal as well? Like, can you see this? It's okay? I can't see you, so I mean, whatever. So we're on the consumer side. Okay, let me do some cleaning. Okay, we're on the consumer side. So consumer-driven contracts is like TDD on architecture level. So as everybody here, I know that you're doing this, you're starting every single feature with a test, right? Everybody does it, that's good. So we already have two tests. The first one is should give me a beer when I'm old enough, and the other should reject a beer when I'm too young, right? I don't have a lot of code written. I have just a controller. There's like nothing here. I return a nil. No code. I mean, I have just one endpoint with post and beer endpoint. That's it. So I'm going to use mock MVC to write the test. Since I will have a lot of coding, I'm just going to do some copy pasting. It's going to be faster. And seems like live coding, right? Okay. There we go. So let me do some imports. Import, and import. Wrong. This one. Okay, so in this case, if I send the post method, method to like application JSON with such a JSON, like person with a name and an age, so for example, Marcin 22. I'm not 22, but I wish I were. Then the result should be okay. And the text we should get is there you go, right? And in the other situation, when I'm too young, I should get lost. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to hide. So, TDD, right? Let's run it. It should be red because I didn't write a single line of implementation, right? So we're running the test. It failed. That's good. Yeah, so at least we started with something. So right now, since I didn't write a single line of code here, I'm thinking what to do. So here I should, as a bartender, right, ask some other service if that person can get the beer. But actually, I don't even know the API of the other service. I don't even know like where to start. So I don't want to ask them to provide me some stubs, or I don't want to clone their code because they haven't even started writing the feature. It's not there. So what can I do? So I'm going to tell you what you can do. You can use Spring Cloud Contracts. I should work in marketing. So basically, what I'm going to do is, as a consumer, since like right now, I'm going to do a fork or a clone of the producer's code. I'm doing it offline because I don't believe in internet during demos. So that's the only reason I'm doing it offline. So I have the producer code here. I'm going to do producer clone. So right now, on the consumer side, I have the clone of the producer. Even though it might sound bizarre, don't worry, there's a reason for that. So right now, as a consumer, I'm going to open the producer clone. Is this guy. New window. Let's wait for this to work. I'm going to check if I'm on the proper branch. I'm not. Okay. So right now, as a producer, I mean, I've checked out I've cloned the code of the producer. There's no production code whatsoever apart from this class. So there's no written feature, nothing there. What is of my interest is this part. So source, test, resources, contract. I think you don't see anything, so I'm going to do this. Okay, so we have source, test, resources, contracts. So with Spring Cloud Contract, we assume that contracts lay under source, test, resources, contracts. And over there, you can do whatever you want. The contracts, as a reminder, this is an agreement between the consumer and the producer on how the API should look like. So let's check out messaging we're going to leave for later. Right now, we're going to work with REST. So let's check out those two files, because I have already prepared the skeleton of the contracts. So first one is should grant a beer if old enough, and the other should reject a beer if too young. Let's check it out. Okay. What do we have here? We have a file that represents something similar to what you have seen with WireMock. So we have a statically typed. For those who think that Groovy is only dynamic, here you will see that it's not, because everything here is a method, nothing dynamic. What do we have here? We have a request part and the response part. In the request part, we have, for example, a description, which can be a readable thing for the BAs. Like here we have represents a successful scenario of getting a beer. So given a client is old enough, when he applies for a beer, then we'll grant him the beer. Makes sense. So nothing is filled out here. I'm going to fill it out right now. So as a consumer, I want to play with the API of the producer. So what I do is I say, okay, maybe the method that I would like to call will be put. Why not? The URL, let it be check. Now this is a Groovy notation of a map, but it's just to define a JSON. So I'm going to say that if a JSON looking like this, name equal to Marcin, and age equal to, it was 22, I think, right? Whatever. And name and age equal to 22. If such a request comes in with such a JSON and headers content type application JSON, if such a thing arrives, then I would like to send back status to 100. And this is another way of defining a JSON in Spring Cloud Contract. You can just type it here, like status, okay. This is in Groovy, a multi-line string, thanks to which you don't have to escape all of those bloody quotes and things like that, so it looks nice. So in this case, what I did right now is that I created a, let's say, scenario that if somebody sends a message to the, like a put method with a URL check, with a JSON having a field name equal to Marcin and the age equal to 22, and it's an application JSON, that the status will be okay. Such a JSON will be sent back. Fair enough, why not? So now, I'm going to copy this, because for sure I'm going to make mistakes while typing, and I'm going to do the same for the other case. So represents an unsuccessful scenario of getting a beer. So given a client is not old enough, I should write too young. When he applies for a beer, then we'll not grant him the beer. So like status is not okay when you're 17, for example. Okay? Makes sense. So right now, as a consumer, I'm going to this producer's code, and I'm going to do, and now I'm going to say a joke. What you always do in your daily work, so we're going to skip tests. Okay, so we're skipping tests for a reason. You're going to see why in a second. Oh, that was funny. Okay, so we did it for two reasons. One is that we are using Spring Cloud Contract Maven plugin, which does some magic. What it does is that it converts this Groovy DSL contract into a WireMock stub. Why? Because otherwise you would have to do all of the escaping of the JSONs, parse your request into JSON paths and all of this stuff. So we do it for you. And the other thing is that we install these stubs into your Maven local, right? So two things. We convert DSL into stubs, and we install them into your Maven local. So if we go, yeah, and already it happens that I cannot find the, oh, there you are. So if we take a look at target, we go to stubs, you will see that we've converted the DSL into a WireMock stub, right? So if you're sending a request to URL check with method put, application JSON, try writing JSON paths yourself. Good luck with that. So we're already doing this for you. And here you have a very simple JSON path. But what about the fact where you have, for example, 5 nested lists? It's not nice, believe me. And if such a JSON is sent, then what we're sending back is a JSON with a field status equal to OK. OK, so why did we do this? Because we want to play with the API of the producer. So right now, if I go back to the consumer code, we left the situation here that we didn't know what the API should look like. Right now, we have some understanding of how we would like things to be done. So I already prepared some code that by chance calls everything properly. So here, what we're doing, what? Okay. Wait a second, I copied not enough stuff here, I think. Copy the whole thing. Okay, import, yeah, there you go. So right now, we're sending a message with a method post to a URL localhost 8090/check with application JSON, and we're sending the person there, like Marcin and 22, right? And if this, in the response, we're going to get the status that can be either OK or not OK. And depending on the status, we send there you go or get lost. Who thinks that if I run this test, it will pass? Nobody. That's very good. Because I'm sending a request, but I didn't start a server or whatever, right? Makes sense, right? So I should get a very nasty exception here. Connection refused, IO error on post, because I'm sending a request to a server that wasn't started. So Spring Cloud Contract on the consumer side comes into play. So what we're going to do right now is add this annotation, because right now you do everything via annotations. So we're saying that Mr. Stub Runner, it comes from Spring Cloud Contract, and as you can assume, it's running stubs. I'm telling Stub Runner that, please, I want to run stubs that are installed in my Maven local, and this is the stub that I would like to run. Group ID come example, artifact ID Beer API producer, with latest version, stubs classifier, and please register it at port 8090. So if we come back to the terminal, you will see here that the artifact that I'm installing here was come example, Beer API producer with version 001 snapshots, and the stubs classifier. So what I would assume that would happen is that Stub Runner would take those stubs, start a fake HTTP server during my build, and feed it with stubs. So theoretically, if I didn't do anything stupid, those tests should pass. And I'm going to put breakpoints, and we're going to rerun it if it does. Haha, obviously didn't pass, and why is it so? Okay. 17. Come again?
Does the person's names matches?
Name matches, but closest match. Oh, I think this is a string. Okay, I know how to fix it. It worked on my machine, obviously. I mean, I knew this would happen, so I have everything prepared like that worked previously. So I'm going to override this. There you go. Okay, this is too much. Okay. Shit. Demo gods, Jesus. Okay, this was, okay, I'm stupid. And actually, it proves a point. Thank God that it didn't pass, because I was sending a integer, but I expected a string. Oof. Okay, so, and these are the kind of things that often I have to rerun the stub installation again, because I have to install the proper new stubs. This is something that happened in one of my previous company, the name of which I don't want to mention because of legal reasons, is once somebody fixed a typo in the API, and because there's this Boy Scout rule, right? So whenever you go to the code, you see one thing that you should fix, then you should fix it. But what the person did is that it fixed a typo in the API, which is nice, but on the other hand, the person broke all the integration with everybody there in the world that was using this API because they had a typo on their side as well. So this is the kind of thing that wouldn't happen if you had such a tool. So actually, that's good that it failed. So right now, make it work, come on. This time it should work. Come on, this is trolling.
We're using put instead of post.
I'm using put instead of post. No, I mean, this is... You're right, thank you. Let's put here. Come on. Oh, Jesus, it worked. Thank God, thank you. If I had a book, I would give you one, but I don't have it. There is one Angular, I guess, that nobody wanted. Okay, so the test passed. So let's let's run it again and see what happened. Jesus. at least you can see that I'm doing a live coding session. It's not pre-prepared, like everything was hard-coded. Okay, so we're running this, and we're here. So there was a real response. I don't know if you can see this. Oh, you can see it here. Like the response is 200, okay, and there was content type application JSON. And the important thing happens in the logs, if you can see them. Ether stub download. Okay, there you go. So here you can see, I'm going to show you this section, that at runtime, the Aether stub downloader has downloaded the desired artifact. So COM example, Beer API producer with classifier stubs. It registered it at port 8090. And this is, let's say, WireMock stuff here. So we can see that the WireMock instance was fed at runtime. Like by chance, I showed you that already things like typos, wrong values of types, you can already catch them. And it's going to fail fast because it's during the build time, right? Okay, so I told you that this is like TDD, so with the API. So at this point, I think that sending both the name and the age doesn't make any sense, because why should name care? And important thing to say is that the producer side, they haven't written a single line of code, right? Nothing there. So right now, I'm going to change the class that I'm going to send. There's going to be no name, because there's no point in sending the name. Okay. I'm going to just send the age. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a request like this, only the age. So if I run this again, what will happen, hopefully, is that it's going to break. Why is it so? Because in the contract, we stated that we need both things. So they are obligatory. I mean, this differs from a schema because I completely don't care if there are 500 other fields in this on the producer side. But we agreed on something, right? So we have to fulfill this contract. So the thing that I'm going to do at this moment, I'm going to go back to post because, yeah, I'm going to go back to post in both cases. And I'm changing the contract that I don't want a name to be there, right? I just want the age. So if I go back to the terminal, I'm going to install the stubs again. Okay, they're installed. And if I go back to my consumer app, if I rerun this, post is here, good, it should pass. Okay, so it did. So another thing, I mean, this example is really trivial, but I don't like the fact that I have to pass in a concrete value for age. Why 22 and not 25, for example? Actually, this is not the best of examples because, let's say we're replicating a little bit of functionality in the contracts, which you shouldn't be doing. But let us assume that it's not an age, it's a timestamp or a database ID. Imagine fixing the clock on your consumer side to provide a specific time to match the request, right? It's terrible stuff, right? If you, let's say in the contract you say that it has to be 5th of January, I don't know, 3 p.m. like and 10 seconds, something like this. So you would have to fix the clock or provide a test factory that would fix an ID on a database or a timestamp. You don't want to do it. So what you can do is provide dynamic values. So in the contract, you can say, I want a value that for the consumer side will be a regular expression. Here we are on the reject side. So I'm going to say, that's why I wanted to have like 20 plus for simplicity. So if the first digit is from 0 to 1 and the other is from 0 to 9, then you're like from 0 to 19. If that's the case, then you're going to get rejected. And if here it's from 1 to 9, from 2 to 9, then you're over 20. So
you sell a beer to a 6-year-old
I will not sell to 6-year-old because from 0 to 19, it's not okay.
Okay, 0, 6.
Yeah, so here you have like
Not
from
6.
come again?
Not 6.
What not 6?
The child should. Yeah, there are 2 digits, not 1.
Okay, come on, it's a demo. I mean, I could do it in a simpler way. So, just a regular expression, you could write whatever you want. This is simpler to understand. Are you a QA? Okay, so right now, if I go back to my tests, I can write here 88. Actually, I would have to write for this to pass 0.5, which is bad. So I was going to do it 12. And this should pass as well, hopefully. Oof, okay, it did. So I was just trying to show you that you can have those dynamic values. There is more that you can do with the DSLs, but we don't have that much time. Okay, so at this point, as a consumer, I'm happy with the API, with the contracts. I assume that, okay, it seems okay. So what I'm doing is I'm filing a pull request to the producer side that, hey, this is the contract that I would like you to fulfill on your side. Of course, I have to be in touch with them all the time because if suddenly I'm going to just send them a pull request and I want them to introduce 500 new endpoints, most likely they're not going to do it. So we have to be in touch, we have to communicate. So right now, I'm switching colors. We're going to the white stuff, to the producer stuff. So I'm going to the terminal. Right now, we're on the producer side, producer, and I'm going to my white IDE, and we're on the pull request branch. So it's Purman's version of a pull request, so we're offline. I didn't do a real pull request. So right now, if we go here, let me check one thing, okay. This is exactly the pull request that I have received, from the consumers. So what do I have on the producer side in terms of the production code? I have my producer application, and I have a controller. And there was a valid question until now when I was doing the demo that I was replicating inside consumer tests the functionality. So I was testing against real functionality. I'm not going to do it right now, and I'm going to give you a reason why. So here you have a controller on the producer side, exactly what we have discussed. So there's a URL check with a method post, application JSON, and the person to check has an age. So what I'm doing, and you should be doing in your code bases, is that the controller shouldn't access the database, for example. It should delegate stuff, right? So what I'm going to do, I have a person checking service. By the way, if anybody thinks that I should have an auto wired here, you're not right, because this is Spring 4.3, I think, where when you have a constructor, Spring will automatically inject everything that is a bean and matches the, let's say, this constructor. Here I have an interface, which is person checking service, that will check if the person should get the beer or not. So, let's leave it for the time being. I will delegate the work to the interface, and basing on the result, I'm going to do some stuff. What I want to show you right now is that in the tests, I don't know why it doesn't see that it's a source. Jesus, it's tests. Bizarre. Anyways, I have two base classes about which I'm going to talk in a second, and I have a test that generates some documentation. So I have only one test over here, right? So right now, I'm going to go to the terminal, and I'm going to do clean install. And let's see what happens. No skipping test this time. There are some warnings, never mind. Oh, wrong folder, sorry. Oh, let's go here, it's going to be better. I'm doing the installation, and it's failing. Why is it so? Not for the reason I wanted, obviously. Oh, let me delete this. We don't need it. Okay, much better. Tests are executed. And I have 3 tests that were run, and there are 2 failures, but I showed you that I have only 1 test. So what the hell is going on? So the thing is, this is the thing that I was talking about. So the thing is that we're talking about contracts that they should provide stub reusability and validity. So this is the validity thing. So from those contracts, we're generating tests. So if we go here to the generated test sources, you will see that we have a test that was generated. What does it mean? If we have a file, should grant a beer if old enough, we create a test, should grant a beer if old enough, right? This is the thing. If in the test we said that we're sending a post method to URL check with certain age, certain headers, and we want status to 100 and status OK as a JSON, we indeed are creating a request with a body age with value that matches the regular expression. We are sending that post method to URL check, and we are expecting status to 100 with content type of matching application JSON, and the field status with value OK. Why? Because if in the contract you're lying, we want your build to fail, because we need to believe in your contracts. If I, as a consumer, will, write tests that use your stubs, I need to be sure that you're not lying to me. That's the very idea. So how can I check it? By using tests. So this is the thing that is generated. Now, I never show it during those fast demos, so all of you who fell asleep in the meantime because they have already seen it, this is the time you wake up. Because an important thing to talk about is that those generated tests need a base class, because you need to set up some stuff and things like this. So there are 3 ways of providing base classes. When you have the Spring Cloud Contract Maven plugin, the same is related to Gradle, you can either say that there is one common base class for all of the generated tests, which was very difficult to maintain, because imagine that you have 400 different contracts and single base class, problematic. So we've introduced 2 other approaches. One is that you provide a package where all of your base classes lay, and there's some convention on how the base class gets resolved. I'm going to show you that in a second. And the third one is that you are doing regular expression matching. I'm going to show that later. So let's focus on the convention one. So if we have under contracts a folder beer rest, then the test will extend a beer rest base test class, which lays under com example package, because we provided it like this here, that the package with base classes will become example. So we have a naming convention, right? So if this contract lays under beer rest, then we need a beer rest base class. So a convention. Now what do we have here? For the tests, we're using Rest Assured, which is a very nice API to perform some REST-based tests. And what we're doing, and that was the case that I didn't do during webinars and stuff like that, is that imagine that inside your code base, inside the controller, you're accessing your database directly. So for the contract tests, you would have to prepare your database to return proper values for your contract tests. But remember, contract tests are not there to test your functionality. They're not for that. They're only to test semantics. Why? Because otherwise, you would start writing the feature twice. Once in the production code and the other one in your contracts. And you don't want to do that. Contract testing is about semantics. I want to be sure that if I send you a message, you'll get it back, right? It's not that the feature works. So the thing that we're gonna do is that inside the producer controller, we will use a service that is an interface. So my test failed because I had no implementation. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say that if person checking service should get the beer, this is an interface that returns Boolean. If the person should get the beer, it's going to return true. If not, it's going to return false. So if the person should get the beer, the response should be beer check status OK. And let's leave it like this for the time being. So is that clear? I mean, imagine that this person checking service would call the database. We don't want that. So we're going to use a mock. And in the beer REST base, we are using Mockito here. So for those who don't know, you can, with a Mockito JUnit runner, you can create a mock like this. And you can use inject mocks for the mocks to be injected automatically. So what Mockito does is going to create a producer controller instance with a person checking service mock injected inside. And in the setup section, I'm saying that if somebody calls that service with a person to check that is old enough, so I put an arbitrary 20 here, then please return true, right? Otherwise, return false. So if I go to my generated test sources, if I run the test for should grant a beer if old enough, I'm going to go over here. Okay, I'm in the base class, I'm setting up the mocks. You can see that the producer controller has the, or you can't see this actually. Okay, now I don't know where it went. Crap. Come on, what? 5. Thank you. Person checking service, right? So producer controller has the mock injected. So we're running that. We're going to send the request. Did I put the breakpoint here? I didn't. So I'm putting a breakpoint here. We're sending the request. We're in the controller. The mock verifies whether the argument matches what I wanted. So the age is over 20. Here I have 24. It does. So the status is 200, and the test passes, right? So I needed to mock my interface in such a way that the test passes. If I run both tests, they will fail because I wrote only part of the mocking, right? Part of the implementation. So in the controller here, I'm going to do return new response, beer check status not OK. And now if I run it, then both tests pass. What it means is that I've prepared, I'm sure that, assuming that Spring Cloud contract doesn't have any bugs, that the contract is telling the truth semantically, right? That if you send me such a body, I will respond with such a response, right? Now, what happens right now is, as a producer, I would merge this PR, and a CI tool like Jenkins or Concourse, whatever, would build it and do the following. Because right now I can, here, I could do clean deploy instead of install. I don't have it, so I'm going to do install. But on CI tool, you would do clean deploy, and you would publish two things. The FAT jar of the application, because we're using Spring Boot, and the stubs. The stubs would get uploaded to Nexus or Artifactory. So it means that you have one source of truth where the stubs lay. I told you about the stub validity and reusability. So validity is because we generate tests that verify if the contract is telling the truth, and reusability because the stubs are in Nexus. So a consumer at this point could say, I don't want to work offline. I want to say that my Nexus or something like this lays link URL to Nexus, whatever, right? And that way, whenever you build your app, it would download the stubs from Nexus or Artifactory or something like this and install them locally. So and then you would use them locally. So it means that if the producers, for some reason, break backwards compatibility, it will break everybody's tests whenever you run them the next time. And that's the idea, because like things have changed, I want my test to break. Okay, so that was the REST part. Now let's go to the messaging side. So the feature was that the consumer app is getting the messages, and there's going to be a verification result in the message, like eligible, not eligible, basing on which it will increase some counter. Okay, let me go back with this. So, as usual, we're going to start with a test. So we have a test saying that should increase the eligible counter when positive verification took place, and should increase the not eligible counter when negative verification took place. As simple as that. So let us assume that we have some sort of a listener, be a verification listener. There's nothing here. We have just two counters. So I would assume this was going to be the app that is going to listen to messages, right? I'm going to say something like this. So initially we have some like current, or let's say count. I'm going to say that listener, eligible counter, get. So this is my initial count, or let's name it initial count. Right now here I would do please trigger a message with positive verification, right? And here I would do, who knows assert J? Okay, not that many people. So if you, and who knows Hamcrest? Hamcrest? Nobody's using Hamcrest? Okay, not many people. So don't use Hamcrest, use assert J for very beautiful assertions. So here we're going to do one of those assertions. So, what we're going to assert here is that after we send that message, then the counter should be greater than the initial count, right? This is our assertion that we want to do, right? And now I told you about what's the most common mistake when doing testing in terms of messaging and payload. So if we go to our verification listener, let's say that the payload we want to send is going to look like this. Public static class, I don't know, verification, and let it have Boolean eligible. Something like this, right? So, and we're going to use Spring Cloud Stream in order to listen to the messages. So I'm going to do stream listener on a channel called input. For those of you that came to the Warsaw Cloud Native meetup, you have already heard about Spring Cloud Stream. If not, Spring Cloud Stream is an abstraction over messaging as such, where you have a concept of a channel. So you're sending a message to a channel. In our case, we are listening to a input channel, right? And the channel can be a RabbitMQ channel, like a destination, like a topic, or a Kafka topic, something like this. So it's an abstraction over a topic or a queue. So here we're going to listen to a channel that is called input, and we're going to listen to a verification, right? So if a message comes in, we're going to parse it to verification. So let's leave it here. In our configuration over here, we're saying that we are listening to a topic called, or a queue called verifications, okay? Verifications. And now, inside my test, I have to trigger a message with those verification to the verifications topic. So what you typically do is new messaging template, send verifications. I want to send a message to verifications, right? And this is the sad part, because we do a message builder with payload. And you type what? New verifications. Verification, whatever. And build, something like this. The problem is that in order to trigger that message, you're using the same class that you're using to, like in the serialization, right? So you will not have a problem with payload, right? Because you're using the same class. But in reality, it doesn't have to be like this. Because, for example, somebody will do eligible, and then it's broken, right? Or you type here like this, your test will pass because you're sending the proper message, because you're using the same code, right? The same class. So what we're going to do is that we're going to use stub trigger, which comes from Spring Cloud Contract, and let's leave it for the time being like this. So now, on the producer side, I will play around with the API related to messaging. So let me go here. I have messaging here. The contract for messaging looks kind of alike. because we have the description as well, sends a positive verification message when person is eligible to get the beer. Given client is old enough, when he applies for a beer, then we'll send a message with positive verification. Now, we have a label here. What is this label? It's something that we're going to use in order to trigger a message, because with REST, you're sending something like a request which triggers the response, right? With messaging, you don't have to have a trigger. Boom, you have a message. Something has happened that you have a message on a topic. So you have to somehow in your tests trigger this message. So you're going to do it via the label. So I'm typing some arbitrary text, accepted verification. Why not? And I'm saying that the output message should be sent to verifications destination, and the body of that message will be eligible equal to true. Right? This is the payload. And now you can see what I was gaining at, because if you are yourself triggering a message in your tests, then you can do whatever you want. But this, as you can assume, will come like from the contract. So you no longer, it's not you who are controlling the payload of what's going to be triggered. It comes from the contract. So that's the first part, and I'm going to copy this to the rejected part. And I'm going to do rejected verification, and eligible is going to be false. So now I'm going to go to my black IDE, black. I'm going to do installation with skipping tests, and that way I'm going to install the stubs also with messaging contracts. So right now, if I go back to my consumer tests, here I will write trigger accepted verification. And now I'm going to copy this below, because the idea is the same, that if I trigger a rejected verification, then the other counter should be increased. So over here I have auto-configure stub runner again. This time, I'm also working offline, but this time I'm not providing the port, for example. Why? Because I don't care, it's messaging. So it's going to register, there's going to be a wire mug there, but it's going to be registered at a random port. I don't care. Completely, it's irrelevant. So what's going to happen right now, obviously for sure I made some mistakes. For example, I didn't write the implementation. So I'm going to copy this from here, why not? So whenever I get the message, I'm going to, if the verification says that the person was eligible, I'm going to increment the eligible counter, and otherwise I'm going to increment the not eligible counter. So let's run the tests. So I'm going to run the first one. Should increase the eligible counter when positive verification took place. Okay, it didn't blow up. Boom. So what happened at this point is that a message was sent that was properly parsed by the parser. I received a new verification, and the verification eligible is true. That's why I incremented the counter. Great. So now, what if I change this to eligible? Let us check it out. Let's run this again. Hopefully it's going to blow up. Oof, it did. So what happened is that, it didn't get properly parsed, right? Let's go further on. Let's say that, let's revert this. Let's say that it's, I don't know, let's say an integer. Okay, that's stupid. Anyways, if that would be, because I don't have that much time to do such tweaks, you would have all the type-related exceptions as well, that I cannot parse the thing, etc. So here already, if the type is invalid, we're going to see it at this point. Let's go further. Let's say that you told me over the phone that it's going to be verification, but with the S at the end. But I typed in verification, right? Why not? Let's see what happens. I'm running the test. It didn't pass because I was waiting for the message to appear on the verification. I was sending the message to verifications, but you're listening to verification. So no way. So all of those typos are immediately caught, which is cool. Okay, so as a consumer, I say, okay, I think this is nice. This API, in terms of messaging, looks nice. The message is okay. So right now, we're going to the white IDE and white terminal. And the white thing is where? Over here. So, I have to undelete the files. Okay. So, this is the pull request that I got, right? So, as we talked, something has to trigger the message, right? So, as you can assume, we're generating tests from this. So how a test will look like. Something has to trigger a message, like on the consumer side, something triggers the message appearing on the topic. On the producer side, something has to trigger sending of a message. It can be a scheduler, it can be a REST message, it can be whatever, right? You get a, I don't know, there's a scheduler running, something happened, and you're starting to send messages to topics or queues. So, what you have to say is, oh, it's over here. What you have to say is that the input is triggered by something. Why? Because we need this thing to be used in your tests, the generated tests. So I'm saying that I'm going to have a method called client is old enough that I want to be executed. No, this is actually negative thing. So client is too young. So I want this method, client is too young, to be executed in my auto-generated tests that will do something at the end of which I will have such a method on such a message on such a topic. So I'm going to check if you're telling the truth. And here I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to copy this. There we go. Client is old enough. So at this moment, if I, oh, sorry. Oh, come on. The test will be generated. And one more thing, I have a service here that is called age checking, person checking service. I'm not good at names. That will, when we check if a person can get the beer, we will send a message, right? This was our agreement, right? One more thing, I told you about the base classes for the auto-generated tests. So if we have beer messaging packages, so there's going to be a beer messaging base class. In the contract, we're saying client is old enough, should be executed. So you can assume that in the base class, I'm going to have such a method. And indeed, I have. Client is old enough, and client is too young. It will execute that age checking, person checking service with a person to check, which is 25, and if too young, with 5. Okay? So now what's going to happen? I'm going to run clean install. And some auto-generated tests will be created, hopefully. And they, hopefully, will break. Started messaging test. I don't know if you can see that. And it's hanging. Because it's waiting for 5 seconds, I think, for the messages to appear. But they don't, because I don't send anything, right? Because I don't have any implementation. So suddenly, I have some null pointer exceptions. Lovely thing. So if I go to target, I have a messaging test. And what happens here is that client is old enough method is executed. We're going to put a breakpoint here. And here, I'm listening for a message at verifications, channel, topic, whatever, to appear. So let's put a breakpoint over here as well. So now, I will write some code. I lied to you, I'm going to copy some code. Okay. So what I'm doing at this moment is the following. If the person's age is greater than 20, I'm going to send a message. Now, I shown you on the consumer side that there's a sink. So sink with an input channel. So the place from which I'm taking the messages. So source is the place to which I'm sending the messages. So source has an output. Like source, I'm sending the message over there. So I'm sending the message with verification that has a field eligible, and I'm sending the message there. Important thing, the destination of this output is verifications, right? Because I need to have some destination to which I'm sending the message. So this can be a RabbitMQ topic called verifications. So if I run I can put a breakpoint over here as well. If I run the generated messaging test, some things should happen. And let's put a breakpoint over here as well. As you can see, I'm already using Spring Context over here, so it's not mocked. So, okay, client is old enough, is going to be executed. Fair enough, I'm here. The age is over 25, so should get the beer is true. So now I should send a message to the verifications topic. We'll see about that. So I'm over here, and right now this line should try to get the message from verifications topic. And indeed it does. And what do I have in response over here? Eligible true, a JSON. Like this class verifications got parsed, and it's a JSON. And right now I'm checking if the field eligible is there and it's equal to true. So if you lied to me, I'm going to find it out. So if inside the contract, we can right now play around with this. Okay, we said send verification, like we're going to send to verifications. So how about we do verifications? Okay, let's run it. And let's see what's going to happen. Hopefully something terrible. Boom. Terrible indeed. No bean named verifications. We can fix the name in general. It should be there is no such queue or something, but in general it's that. There's no such queue. Another thing that we can check if I have time, but I think I don't. So again, all of those semantics things will be checked. If you would have like eligible or thing, we would check it out that, hey, you're lying, it's improper. So the concept was here like the same. We have a pull request, we would merge it, and off we go. Okay, so let me close this. Where are we? Because I'm really out of time. So messaging as well. And we support Spring Cloud Stream, Spring Integration, and Apache Camel. Whatever you use, we're going to stub it out. And you have different ways of defining input, because here you had input triggered by, but I think there is input, no, there is also message from. So you can simulate a processor that if you send me a message to this destination with such headers and such body, I'm going to send you a message to that destination. Or even better, you can have a situation, because it happens, that if you send a message to this input, I'm not going to do anything else. Like, I'm not going to send a message. But you can do some sort of assertions, like, if there's a message, then I will insert something to the DB. Or I'm going to call this, you can do some sort of assertions. I'm not going to talk about this. You can check out the docs. Okay. So let's go to the slides. I'm going to quickly recap what we did. So we had 3 phases of work at the moment. So we had a consumer's offline work that played around with the API, with the contracts as such. The output of which is a contract. If you agree on this contract with the producer, then this can happen in parallel. Let's say that you played around with the API, with the contract, it seems okay. You give, like we talk to the producers, you agree on the contract, they can give you like a stub with the interface that I shown you, and then, they can start implementing their stuff. in parallel. You don't have to block. The only blocking thing is let's agree on the contract. And then consumer is switching to online mode. So we had such a situation that there was a producer who owned the contracts and you had the consumer over there. The consumer cloned the producer code in order to interact with the contracts. He played around the contracts, he was happy, he filed a PR to the producer. Now I'm going to skip this slide because it's for, I just said it, and it's for those who read the slides on SlideShare and they don't know what I was talking about. So basically, that's the thing. You do TDD, you clone the producer, you play around with the API, you configure StubRunner properly to work offline and to download the producer's stubs. Red-green refactor, and this is the key thing. Play around with the API, right? And you repeat the process until you're happy. And you file the PR. Now the producer takes over the PR, writes the missing implementation, and merges to master this PR. So then the next time CI builds the producer code, it uploads the FAT jar and the stubs to something like Nexus or Artifactory. And I just said that. So this is the key thing, right? It's the missing implementation that will make the auto-generated test pass, because we want to be sure that you're telling the truth. Now, the other flow is the consumer switches to online mode. That, hey, okay, the stubs are there. Right now, please download it from this Nexus, because this is the source of truth. So if you have like the Sun architecture with the monolith in the middle, once the monolith uploads the stubs, every single consumer can reuse it. And I just said this. Right? You provide the URL to repo with stubs. And whenever the producer makes any breaking changes of the API, when you try to build your stuff, it's going to break. And now you could say, so the contracts are there. So who is using ASCII Doctor? Almost nobody. You should start doing that. So ASCII Doctor gives you the possibility to create living documentation. So you write your documentation in such a way that you can embed parts of your code. Because the moment you type in the code in the docs, it gets outdated because somebody does refactoring and it's no longer valid. So for example, Spring Cloud contracts, Spring Cloud documentation, and Spring as such also, is using the code from the tests directly, that it's put into the docs. So right now what you could do is that I created this generate addocs from contract tests. It's a poor man's version. Don't look at the implementation. It was really done in a fast way. That if you run it and you go to generated snippets, you will find such a poor man's version of the documentation. So I have all the contracts there. I type in the name of the contract. I provide the description field so the BAs can read exactly the scenarios that happen in your system. Remember, this is more than a schema, because first it's not the schema, and then it shows you a scenario. It's not just, I have these fields, and I like on the request side, and I'm going to send you such fields on the like response side. It's more than that. It's some sort of a scenario that, hey, you can be, let's say, given a beer, or you can be like rejected. The BA can read about this. The BA can check like in the BDD style what it's all about. And then I did a poor man's version because I just copy pasted the, I just put in the whole file of the contract. But you can do it in a more intelligent way, like pick out what you need, like this is the body, or this is the verification, this is the destination, something like this. So you can create living documentation out of it. You change the contract, the docs change immediately because it's like embedded, right? It's generated. So now what you could say, like another thing, is that, are you crazy? My security will not allow me to clone somebody else's repo. Impossible, not a chance. And that's a valid point. So there is another demo, which I have not a lot of time to show. So basically, I will, where do I have it? Okay, this was the cloned producer. So right now, I'm going to clone something else. So I have a repo with all of the contracts in it. So instead of having the contracts with the producer, for those who have heard the webinar, I just mentioned about this, I didn't show the demo, so this is time for the demo. So basically here, maybe it's going to be easier to see it over here. I'm going to the beer contracts repo. Tree, okay. Can you see this? No, not a chance. Better? There you go. So this is a repo that has a very strictly defined structure. Oh Jesus, it's gigantic. Okay, so first of all, this is a Maven project. It has an assembly. So Maven assembly plugin allows you to create a custom jar. The custom jar will be the contents of source main resources contracts. I want to create from this repo a jar that has all the contracts for every single application that we have, right? So this is one single source of truth. I have some tests because I don't think I'm going to have time to show you that, but if you can start thinking, hey, if I have all the contracts in one place, then can I just generate the documentation of every single message, like message scenario related to REST or messaging? Yes, you can. And you can generate it exactly in the same way as I've shown you on the producer side. So you can create an ASCII doctor documentation of every single contract that you have. So right now, what we're gonna, one more thing. I told you that the structure is very specific. So this is a group ID, and this is an artifact ID, right? If you do it like this, if you follow this convention, a lot of magnificent things will happen in your life. So what we're gonna do is, as a consumer, I'm gonna add my contracts, because I'm gonna consume the API of ComExample Beer API Producer External. So I'm gonna place my contracts over here, and I'm gonna work offline with them, right? So I'm going to do it at this point. In general, I would type it, but I don't have time. So I'm going to just, okay. I'm going to just copy this. So I'm going to create, another convention is that I'm creating a folder with my name, because that way the ComExample Beer API Producer External project will know who is consuming it, and if it's changing the API or contracts, it will know which consumer it's breaking. So my name is API consumer or something like this, Beer API consumer. And right now, I need to copy the tests, the contracts, because yeah. So I'm gonna just copy these. Where are you? Over here. I can't do it. Okay. Now, source, main resources. Time for Midnight Commander. This is terrible stuff. Producer clone. Yeah, let's copy it from here. Producer. Wrong branch. Okay, resources, contracts, beer. Done, sorry, wrong one. Okay, so I'm copying this over here. Copy. Okay. Clear. Okay. So at this moment, yeah, I have some things here. Okay, so I have my contracts over here, right? So these are exactly the same contracts as previously, right? So what can I do with this? So as a consumer, where am I? Okay, I'm here. So I'm working offline, right? So I'm gonna do Maven clean install skip tests. Why? Because here I have a POM, right, in which I have defined that this project will have its contracts like over here, and the name will be COM_EXAMPLE, and artifact ID will be beer API producer external, right? So you need two POMs. One is in the root in order to generate the jar with all of the contracts, and you need the second POM in order to install the stubs locally. So that's what I'm going to do at the moment. I'm going to install it locally. I have to skip tests because I don't want any auto-generated tests. So hopefully it worked. So I'm going back to my code, and I have prepared a test over here, which looks exactly the way it's like the other test looked, but the only difference is that I'm picking in different artifact ID, right? Because I changed the artifact ID to show you that I didn't have anything cached whatsoever. I created a new artifact. So this is exactly the same test as the beer controller, but what's different is the artifact. So right now, as a consumer, I will run the test against the stubs that were created from the external repository. And since I was doing everything very fast, for sure it's not going to work. Oh, Jesus, it worked. Okay, good. And for messaging as well, let's run it. It's working. So the stubs from the that were installed from the repo that contains all of the contracts are working. So right now, as a consumer, I would file a PR to this external repo, right, with all of the contracts saying, hey, these are the contracts I would like to have. So I'm not interacting with the producer. I'm interacting with the repo that has all of the contracts. And right now, I'm going to the producer. So I'm changing my my colors, so to say. And right now, I have to open another project because I have it configured like this, producer with external contracts. There you go. Let's open this. So I told you that there are two ways of defining base classes. So I'm going to show you the second one. So over here, I have the base class mappings. So what you can do is that you're providing a regular expression. So I'm saying that whatever messaging related contracts are there, please use the COM_EXAMPLE beer messaging base class. And if there's anything REST related, please use the beer REST base class. So here you can do arbitrary, you can provide arbitrary mapping of a test to the base class, right? Another thing is that under source test resources, I mean, I don't even have source test resources. It's no longer there. So the producer says that all of the contracts should be taken from a jar, which is COM_EXAMPLE beer contracts, right? So there is going to be a jar containing all of the contracts from like whole system that we have. And I'm also saying that, hey, I want to work offline because I'm having, I took DPR and right now I need to work offline. So what I have to first do is to install those contracts. So I had them over here. So what I'm going to do is I have to go back. And I'm doing clean install. So right now I'm going to create a jar with all of the contracts using this assembly plugin. Okay, so if I go to target, you will see beer contracts snapshot version that contains all of the contracts, right? You have the POM, you have COM_EXAMPLE, beer API producer external, beer API consumer, messaging contracts, and REST contracts, right? All the contracts are there. And right now, as a producer, what will happen is, as you can imagine, that tests will be generated again. And I have all the implementation here, so it should work. So I'm just going to do a clean install. I'm in the wrong folder, sorry. Yeah. I'm going to do clean install. What is crucial to remember is that there's this convention. So what happens is that my app, my app is called COM_EXAMPLE beer API producer external. So I'm going to download the jar with all of the contracts, search for a folder, com/example/beer API producer external, and I'm going to pick all of the contracts that are there. And from those contracts, again, tests are generated. And we have a messaging test, a REST test, again, the same thing. And I produce stubs again, like this. So you can, like your source of truth can be a single repo with all of the contracts in your system. I guarantee that the BAs will be very happy to have this. And since I'm almost out of time, I'm going to show you very quickly one last thing. So this is what I'm going to almost roam around this. So this is what I've shown you. So we have repo with all of the contracts. So the consumer is cloning that repo with all of the contracts, interacting with that repo, filing a PR with the changes to that repo, right? Now the producer is taking over that repo, that PR. He's writing the missing implementation for the test to pass, and the PR gets merged. Then the CI builds this, right? A jar with all of the contracts is published to Nexus, and then the producer, when it is built, downloads that jar, the tests are generated, the stubs are created, and they are uploaded to Nexus or Artifactory. So you have, again, one source of truth. Yeah, so I just said that. So I'm just going to skip it. Yeah, let's continue. And now the last thing. Some people hate DSLs, hate Groovy, they won't want to use it. Why are you nodding your head? I love Groovy. So yeah, but that's the case. Some people don't like it, and some people are, for example, already have a lot of REST docs tests, right? They're already testing their API, and they just don't want to use it. Fair enough. You can use Spring Cloud Contract WireMock with REST docs. So this is going to be last demo. So at the moment, I'm going to be the producer this time. I'm going to start as a producer. I'm going to open the last project. So producer with REST docs. Let's open this. We don't have that much time, so I'm just going to show you the result, how it should look like. So we have two things. We have producer controller tests. So this is a test that uses REST docs, saying that all of the snippets will be in target snippets, right? For those who don't know REST docs, it's an extension, so to say, to mock MVC that allows you to create documentation of your REST endpoints out of the box automatically. So you already know this. So we used mock MVC to send a request. And now cool things happen here. So first of all, we use mock MVC to ensure that the JSON of the response, like the response contains proper values. So this is the first thing. So one more thing. So these two tests, until now, were generated for us. This time we have to do it ourselves because we don't want to use the DSL. So we're using REST docs. And here the awesome thing happens, because this verify comes from WireMock REST docs. So this comes from Spring Cloud Contract. So we say that there is a dynamic value of age that we care about, right? The content type we want to be application JSON. So all of the things that you put into the DSL, you have to put here manually in this part. And you say that should grant a BREF old enough, stop should be created. What does it mean? Let's run this and see. So we run this. It gets executed. The test pass. And now, if we go to target, you will see the following. We have snippets. So first snippet is that for example, should grant a BREF old enough, you have the, what is this? It's an ad hoc. So you have the curl request as an example of what was sent, like in your test. You can have how the HTTP request looks like. You have HTTP PY as well. So we have different things that simulate sending of that particular message. And from our perspective, what we get are stubs. So you get the same thing over here. but using ResDocs, you have a WireMock stub. So some people say that they don't want to download at runtime the stubs. They want to put them as a dependency. Fair enough. So what we have here is, again, the assembly plugin. So what we're doing, let's not go into details of that. What we're doing is that we manually will create the stubs jar, right? Manually create the stubs jar. So let's run it. So let's go over producer with ResDocs. Let's do clean install. So we're going to run the tests. The ResDoc snippets will be created. And the stubs jar is going to be created as well. If we check out the stubs jar, there you go. This is the stubs. It has a different structure because why not? So in the meta-inf, we have COM example. So this is the group ID. And this is the artifact ID, Beer API producer ResDocs. The artifact ID of the producer. And it contains contracts and stubs. So different jar, because we can, why not? So this is the producer side, and how can we use it on the consumer side? I promise you this is the last demo. So I'm going to open the consumer with ResDocs. There we go. I'm showing you Maven all the time, but you can of course use Gradle, and in the Spring Cloud contract samples you have both things. So over here, we're providing the stub dependency, right? COM example, Beer API producer ResDocs stubs. And the key thing to remember is those exclusions. Because remember that you have one POM for both the FAT jar and the stubs. So if you don't exclude, you get all the dependencies that the other project has, and you don't want it. So what happens is, in my tests, I'm using this time something else, which is auto-configure WireMock, which comes from Spring Cloud contract. And I'm saying that my stubs reside on the class path under meta-inf, COM example, Beer API producer, ResDocs, something, and these are JSONs. So you don't have to download these dependencies every time. You can put them as your dependency of the project, and if we run it, I did install them, yes I did, so it should work. Also, you can provide a file here if you want to provide JSON, like stubs from the file. And the tests pass again. This is exactly the same test. So what happens is that WireMock was going to be set up at port 8090 with the stubs residing over here, right? So there are different ways of doing that. And that's it. Okay, so I'm going to do a recap. Summary. So what did we do using Spring Cloud contract and consumer-driven contracts as such? We created an API that suits the needs of the consumer and the producer, right? Because there's conversation going on, both sides are happy, everybody's happy. Expectations were defined by readable contracts to such an extent that you can generate documentation out of it that BAs can read, everybody can read them. Expectations were tested against the producer. You can't lie in your contract because your test won't pass. If your test won't pass, you will not publish your stubs. That's it. Producer stubs can be used by consumers because once you pass the generated tests, or if you write your ResDoc tests, you upload the stubs to a single place, which is Nexus, for example. Starting and setting stubs is fully automated, regardless of whether you pick Spring Cloud, like the stub runner approach or the auto-configure WireMock. And why could you consider using Spring Cloud Contract Verifier? Because this is the tool that I've presented to you. You can use messaging. You can use the statically typed DSL if you want to. No dynamic monsters. You could see that the compiler helped me to provide the methods. You have automatically generated tests from contracts. You have Stub Runner, which has automatically downloads at runtime the dependencies. This is nice. We have Spring Cloud integration. So if you're using Spring Cloud and you're using service discovery, like Consul, for example, it's kind of fishy to use it in your tests because you cannot have an embedded console because it's not a JVM-based app. You would have to do some sort of tweaking, like Docker before, and the Docker, like Docker before running the test and close it. So you can, like if you use Spring Cloud contract, it's stopped out. You don't care. Because we're going to start a wiremock for you, and whenever you ask via service discovery for a like dependency or for a collaborator, we're going to route it to the wiremock. So it's completely hidden for you. And this is also nice. It's not only for Cloud Foundry, but we have an app called Stubrunner Boot. So basically, if you deploy your app and you want to test it in isolation, you can run the Stubrunner Boot thing and tell it, please download those stubs. And what it will do, that for every single stub that you're going to say that you want to, let's say, download, it's going to start a wiremock instance and, for example, register it in real Eureka. So, or for example, send a real message, as I shown you, on a real RabbitMQ. So you can test it in isolation. Like your app that you're testing will not even know that you're talking to a stub or the message came from a stub. This is really nice. Okay, so if we have time, for some questions, and in the meantime, I'm going to show just this. So you can like read the docs, check the samples, and talk to me on Gitter, Spring Cloud Contract Gitter, or text me or do whatever to find me. So in the meantime, do we have time for questions? Or yeah, we do. So questions. So is there someone who completely didn't understand anything? Okay, that's good. So no questions? If you're shy, okay, there's a question.
Will the code be available somewhere online?
Go to GitHub to Spring Cloud Samples /Spring Cloud Contract Samples. So if I'm going to post those slides, and if you click this link, you'll get there. So I think I'm going to put it also on the meetup page. So yeah, they are available. And since I'm an automation freak, actually those samples are running in our Jenkins. I'm testing if it's still running, like working. Both for Maven and Gradle, all of the things that I've shown you are used in our tests. Any more questions? No questions. So if you're shy, we're going for a beer or something, right? So you can ask me questions there. You can send me a message, and if you don't care, just, I don't know, drink a beer. Thank you. Thank you.